When Arya Stark is given 3 death wishes, she doesn't just make a wish or 3, she turns the entire story against itself and reshapes it to her benefit. Welcome to the Lore Weaver Podcast, a space for deep dive literary analysis, character studies, and thematic readings across fantasy, historical fiction, and speculative worlds. Here we look beyond surface level takes and popular shorthand to examine what the text is actually doing, how power works, how belief shapes outcomes, and how characters are flattened or misunderstood over time. Let's get into today's topic. Fairy tales don't just run on magic. They run on rules. They are structured systems where certain patterns repeat themselves. 3 wishes, binding bargains, hidden names, and doors that only open when the right words are spoken. Within those systems, outcomes depend on how well a character understands what they've been given and how far they can push it. George R.R. Martin doesn't just borrow these patterns, he uses them intentionally and breaks them down. And Arya Stark's story is one of the clearest places where that happens. When she is given 3 deaths by Jaqen H'ghar, Arya immediately interprets it through the logic of old man stories. This is significant because Arya is not just inside a fairy tale structure, she recognizes it as one. She understands that the gift is limited, that it has weight, and that the final choice carries the most consequence. From the start, her story is not about following the rules, but about using them to her advantage. To understand what Martin is doing with Arya, it helps to briefly define the system that's being used. As noted in my Cinderella in A Song of Ice and Fire episode, the Arn Thompson Uther Index, or ATU, is a classification system that organizes folktales by recurring narrative structures. Instead of grouping stories by culture or character, it groups them by pattern, the underlying logic that drives how the story unfolds. The narratives Martin uses with Arya and her story with the Faceless Men are ATU 750A, The 3 Wishes, ATU 330, The Smith and the Devil, and ATU 500, The Name of the Supernatural Helper. When it comes to establishing that Arya is operating inside of a fairy tale structure, Martin does not leave it to subtext. He makes it explicit, and as noted above, he lets Arya recognize it herself. Specifically with ATU 750A, the 3 Wishes pattern, a supernatural figure grants a mortal a fixed number of wishes, usually 3. The drama comes from how those wishes are used. Sometimes they are used wisely, more often they are wasted, or used on frivolous things. The 3rd wish becomes the moment of correction, where the impact of the first 2 wishes are undone or fixed somehow, and Martin directly signals this structure through Arya's own thoughts. In Old Nan's stories about men who were given magic wishes by a grumpkin, you had to be especially careful with the 3rd wish, because it was the last. This is not subtle. Arya understands the logic of the story she is in. She knows that when you are given 3 supernatural chances, the last chance carries the most weight, but rather than a moment of correction, she uses the last wish to expand the gift. Her situation fits the pattern almost perfectly. First, she saves Jaqen H'ghar along with Rorg and Biter, and in return, he offers her 3 death wishes. This is a fixed number, a supernatural bargain, and a system with rules. Arya's first instinct is to break those rules to get what she needs instead of what is being offered. Here's the passage. A man must pay his debts. A man owes 3. 3? The red god must have his due, sweet girl, and only death may pay for life. This girl took 3 that were his. This girl must give 3 in their places. Speak the names, and a man will do the rest. He wants to help me, Arya realized, with a rush of hope that made her dizzy. Take me to Riverrun. It's not far. If we stole some horses, we could... He laid a finger on her lips. 3 lives you shall have of me. No more, no less. 3 and we are done. So a girl must ponder. As you can see, Arya's initial reaction is to try to use this situation to get to Riverrun and her mother, even though he had specifically said 3 death wishes. While she initially does follow his rules with the first 2 wishes, she goes back to breaking the rules with the 3rd. At first, Arya uses those deaths in ways that feel morally clear. She names Chiswick after hearing him laugh about his participation in a gang essay of a 13-year-old girl. Then she names Wheeze, a man who repeatedly beats and brutalizes her. These are not careless choices. They remove immediate monsters from the world she is trapped in. But they are also limited. They do not change the overall world around her. And that is where Martin begins to bend the fairy tale. In a conventional three wishes story, the third wish is the chance to finally use the gift properly. Arya realizes this too late when she sees Tywin and Gregor Clegane leaving Harrenhal and understands that those were the men who actually shaped the violence around her. But instead of simply choosing a better target, she does something far more interesting. She exploits the rules. That is where the story begins to shift into another folktale pattern, ATU 330, The Smith and the Devil. In that type, a mortal enters a bargain with a supernatural figure, often death or the devil. The protagonist receives magical advantages or wishes, but the real point of the story is not that he uses them morally, it is that he uses them cleverly. He traps the devil. He forces death to bargain. He turns the supernatural being's own rules against him. This is exactly what Arya does. Here's the passage in A Clash of Kings when Arya meets with Jaqen in the Godswood. "Swear it," Arya said. "Swear it by the gods of sea and air, and even him of fire. I swear it." He placed a hand in the mouth of the weirwood. "By the 7 new gods, and the old gods beyond count, I swear it." He has sworn. "Even if I name the king?" "Speak the name, and death will come. On the morrow, at the turn of the moon, a year from this day, it will come. A man does not fly like a bird, but one foot moves and then another. And one day a man is there, and a king dies." He knelt beside her so they were face to face. "A girl whispers if she fears to speak aloud. Whisper it now. Is it Joffrey?" Arya put her lips to his ear. "It's Jaqen H'ghar." Even in the burning barn, with walls of flame towering all around, and him in chains, he had not seemed so distraught as he did now. "A girl." She makes a jest. "You swore. The gods heard you swear." Jaqen has sworn that whoever she names will die, so Arya names Jaqen himself. What's fascinating about this scene is that Arya is able to not only trick a grown adult with magical abilities, but she actually manages to scare him. He's more frightened in that moment than he was when he was chained up in a barn that was set on fire with a battle raging all around. Drawing out that unintended reaction from a trained professional is an achievement in its own right. This moment is repeated again with the kindly man during A Dance with Dragons, but we'll get to that later. In that moment, Arya traps Jaqen inside of his own promise. If he honors his oath, he dies. If he refuses, he breaks the rule that defines the bargain. So he has to renegotiate. This time Arya doesn't ask to be taken to Riverrun. Instead, she uses her wish for something closer to home in Harrenhal. Arya turns the one remaining death into something far larger, not by choosing wisely, but by rewriting the terms of the deal. This is not only simply a 3 wishes story anymore, but also a trickster story. And Martin layers in one more folktale logic, ATU 500, the name of the supernatural helper, best known through stories like Rumpelstiltskin. In that type, a supernatural helper assists a young woman under impossible conditions, but the help comes with a terrible price. The only way out is through a hidden rule, usually the helper's name. Once the woman discovers and speaks that name, the power dynamic flips. Arya's story is not a direct retelling of ATU 500. She does not uncover Jaqen's secret true name, but Arya echoes the same logic. Power is tied to names, rules, and conditions. Arya survives by figuring out what actually governs the supernatural helper. She does not guess his name, but she does use his name while weaponizing his promise. By using Jaqen's name inside the rules he gave her, she makes the magical promise respond to her. And that is what makes this sequence so important. Arya is not just participating in a fairy tale, she is actively outmaneuvering it. But Martin does not let that become a clean victory. Arya thinks she is freeing captives and changing the balance. In reality, she is stepping into a plan already in motion. Her plan was to help free the captured Northmen in Harrenhal so that they could overtake the castle. What she doesn't know is that the brave companions and the Northmen had staged the capture in the first place with the same intent of taking the castle for the Northerners. Her participation in it puts her on the right side of the victors in that scenario, but the difficulty difficulty is, Harrenhal is taken, the Lannisters do lose the castle, but the Boltons take it in their place. One set of monsters is replaced with another. Even Arya's reward is compromised. She is elevated from an abused laborer to Roose Bolton's cupbearer. She now has better clothing, better living quarters, and her work is less physically punishing. But that upward movement still places her in the service of another dangerous lord, and that lord intended to leave her with the brave companions once he was done with her. So Martin is layering 3 folktale logics at once: the 3 wishes structure, which Arya recognizes, the devil bargain structure, which Arya manipulates, and the name and rule structure, which Arya bends through Jaqen's oath. Then he deconstructs them all, because in a traditional fairy tale, outwitting the supernatural being is the victory. In Arya's story, it is survival, and even when she wins, the world does not get better, it just changes. So at Harrenhal, Arya learns that she can shape the rules in her favor. In Braavos, she uses the same tactic, but within a larger institution. Before disappearing from Arya's story, Jaqen gifts her with an iron coin. What is it? A coin of great value. Arya bit it. It was so hard it could only be iron. Is it worth enough to buy a horse? It is not meant for the buying of horses. Then what good is it? As well ask what good is life, what good is death. If the day comes when you would find me again, give that coin to any man from Braavos, and say these words to him: Valar morghulis. Valar morghulis, Arya repeated. It wasn't hard. Her fingers closed tight over the coin. Across the yard, she could hear men dying. Please don't go, Jaqen. Jaqen is as dead as Ari, he said sadly, and I have promises to keep. Valar morghulis, Arya Stark. At the end of A Storm of Swords, Arya tries to buy passage to the north with silver. She doesn't have enough money, but when she produces the iron coin and says the words she was taught, everything changes as if she worked magic. The captain was turning away when she said, "What ship is this?" He paused long enough to give her a weary smile. "This is the Gallius Titan's daughter of the free city of Braavos." "Wait," Arya said suddenly. "I have something else." She had stuffed it down inside her small clothes to keep it safe, so she had to dig deep to find it, while the oarsmen laughed and the captain lingered with obvious impatience. "1 more silver will not make a difference, child," he said. "It's not silver." Her fingers closed around it. "It's iron. Here." She pressed it into his hand, the small black iron coin that Jaqen H'ghar had given her, so worn the man whose head it bore had no features. "It's probably worthless, but..." The captain turned it over and blinked at it, then looked at her again. "This? How?" Jaqen said to say the words too. Arya crossed her arms against her chest. "Valar morghulis," she said, as loud as if she'd known what it meant. "Valar de Harris," he said, touching his brow with 2 fingers. "Of course you shall have a cabin." And just like that, Arya goes from being trapped in the salt pans with nowhere to go to having passage to Braavos. That's of course not where she wants to go, though. Repeatedly, Arya has tried to get home to her family, whether it was to the north with her family, to the Wall with Jon, or to Riverrun where her mother was staying at the time. But this story element takes her away from the dangers of the salt pans to Braavos and the House of Black and White. This isn't just magic, it's access. The coin does not function on its own. The words do not function on their own. Together they open the door, and then they open another door. At the House of Black and White itself, Arya repeats the same tactic. "The doors are watching me," she thought. She pushed upon both doors at once, with the flat of her gloved hands, but neither one would budge. Locked and barred. "Let me in, you stupid," she said. "I crossed the narrow sea." She made a fist and pounded. "Jaqen told me to come. I have the iron coin." She pulled it from her pouch and held it up. "See? Valar morghulis." The doors made no reply, except to open. That repetition is deliberate on Martin's part in telling the story. Power here responds only with the correct combination invoked, and the House of Black and White makes that system physical. This is where Arya's story moves deeper into the logic of ATU 330. Not just a single bargain with a supernatural figure, but ongoing survival within a system governed by binding rules. She is no longer outwitting a single opponent, but is dealing with an entire cult. And layered over that is the more specific echo of ATU 500, the name of the supernatural helper. In those tales, power is tied to identity, to hidden conditions, to rules that must be discovered and used correctly. Arya's situation is not identical, but it rhymes. She does not uncover a secret name. Instead, she identifies the rules that govern the system and begins to operate within them. The power of names is still there, though, but in a way it's actually the opposite of the story with the supernatural helper at times. On the ship to Braavos, the crew members repeat their names to her, making certain she knows them, while treating her as someone to be avoided or given reverence to. Some of the crew members shunned her, but others gave her gifts: a silver fork, fingerless gloves, a floppy woolen hat patched with leather. One man showed her how to tie sailor's knots. Another poured her thimble cups of fire wine. The friendly ones would tap their chests, repeating their names over and over, until Arya said them back, though none ever thought to ask her name. We later learn that this was the crew's way of making certain that Arya could not be assigned to kill them later. We learn this during a meeting with the Faceless Men, that the members of the organization aren't allowed to kill anyone that they know. So with Arya knowing their names, she could never be hired to assassinate them. So in this way, her knowing their names is a form of protection. But names are also used to disguise the Faceless Men. The first lesson the kindly man teaches her is not about killing, but about identity. Technically, Arya had already been using this skill with identity since just after her father's death, when Yoren decided that her name would be Ari. This continued as she took on other names while living in disguise, but her first meeting with the Faceless Men unravels that. "Who are you?" the kindly man asked. Arya tries to answer with the names she has used to survive: Ari, Weasel, Nan, Squab, Salty. Each one is rejected, each one stripped away until she is forced back to the truth. "I am Arya of House Stark." And the response is clear. "You are, but the House of Black and White is no place for Arya of House Stark." That is the rule. To remain there in safety, she must give that up, and for a time it appears that she plans to follow their rules. She learns languages, she learns their rituals and their discipline. She learns to read faces so precisely that lies show in breath and muscle. She learns to control her own expression. She takes on new identities, like Cat of the Canals and Blind Beth, and uses them to move through the city as one of the crowd. She listens, observes, and adapts. Like folktale protagonists, she survives through precision and restraint, and she learns their central principle: we never give the gift to please ourselves. That is the boundary. But Arya has never been one who simply accepts boundaries. She finds ways around it, because while she is learning the system, she is also firmly resisting it. The Faceless Men tell her the cost to remain with them rather than being thrown out onto the streets. "The price is you. The price is all you have and all you ever hope to have." And Arya appears to comply. She gives up the possessions she collected while living under other identities one by one. The visible pieces of her past name sink into the canal. But when she reaches Needle, the pattern breaks, because Needle is not a part of a false identity. Needle is part of who Arya Stark is. Needle was Robb and Bran and Rickon, her mother and father, even Sansa. Needle was Winterfell's grey walls and the laughter of its people. Needle was the summer snows, old Nan's stories, the heart tree with its red leaves and scary face, the warm earthy smell of the glass gardens, the sound of the north wind rattling the shutters of her room. Needle was Jon Snow's smile. "He used to mess my hair and call me little sister," she remembered, and suddenly there were tears in her eyes. Polliver had stolen the sword from her when the Mountain's men took her captive, but when she and the Hound walked into the inn at the crossroads, there it was. The gods wanted me to have it. Not the Seven, nor him of many faces, but her father's gods, the old gods of the north. The many-faced god can have the rest, she thought, but he can't have this. Arya does not outright refuse. She does what she did at Harrenhal by working around the rule. She hides the sword so it's no longer on her person. Outwardly, she continues training. Inwardly, she preserves the core of herself. Needle is not just a weapon, it is a memory, it is Winterfell, it is Jon Snow, and it is Arya of House Stark, and that dual existence becomes the defining feature of her arc in Braavos. Inside the system, she obeys enough to advance. She also disobeys at times, which results in advancing anyway. Outside it, she keeps what the system cannot account for. Even her blindness follows this pattern. Arya executes a Night's Watch deserter she crosses paths with in Braavos while living as Cat of the Canals. This is a very stark and northern thing to do. It is the law in Westeros that a Night's Watch deserter has forfeit their lives. Her people in particular believe in passing the sentence with their own hand. In executing this man, Arya proves that she has retained her identity as Arya Stark and as a Northerner. The Faceless men take her sight to sharpen her senses and as a punishment for the unsanctioned execution, to force her deeper into their methods. And Arya adapts. She learns to hear, smell, and feel with precision. But she also finds another path through her own natural magical ability to skin change, which was passed down to her through her First Men heritage. Since A Clash of Kings, Arya has been unknowingly warging into her direwolf Nymeria. This would happen through dreams and unintentional moments of connection, such as the direwolf howling at just the right time or giving warnings. This ability expands with the loss of her sight. Through her connection to Nymeria, through her wolf dreams, she begins to see again. Without her sight, her abilities as well as her senses strengthen, similarly to how Bran's powers strengthened while he was living in the crypts in total darkness. Her powers grow strong enough that when she bonds with a cat, Arya can knowingly skin change into that animal while she is awake. The skin changing of the cat while she is blind allows her to see that the kindly man is the one beating her, even though he has disguised his voice and smell, resulting in her shocking even him, and a slight echo to the scene in A Clash of Kings when she tricks Jaqen. The scene went this way. Every time Arya goes out as Blind Beth, she has to return with 3 secrets to tell the kindly man, and this exchange ensued. This is 2. Is there a third? Yes, I know that you're the one who has been hitting me. Her stick flashed out and cracked against his fingers, sending his own stick clattering to the floor. The priest winced and snatched his hand back. How could a blind girl know that? I saw you. I gave you 3. I don't need to give you 4. Maybe on the morrow, she would tell him about the cat that had followed her home last night from Pinto's, the cat that was hiding in the rafters looking down on them, or maybe not. If he could have secrets, so could she. The way Arya is able to hit the kindly man and make him wince, showing uncontrolled emotion, is hugely significant here, just like the moment Arya scared Jaqen in Harrenhal. It shows that she has taken control in that moment, and that the kindly man has lost it despite being a seasoned priest with magical power and knowledge. She has effectively tricked the devil, if not fully trapping him yet, and the kindly man knows it. This results in the return of Arya's sight and her advancing in the Faceless Men order. And that's also a fascinating aspect of this story. Arya is obeying while also breaking the rules, and the kindly man knows it, yet she continues to advance. He keeps asking her the same question. Who are you? And Arya keeps answering, no one, but every time the response is the same. A lie. Because it is. Arya learns everything they teach her. She learns to control her face, how to make poisons, how to speak different languages, and to strengthen her own disciplines. She even learns how to give the gift of death without being seen into an invisible chain of cause and effect. But she never fully becomes what they want her to be. She keeps Needle, she keeps her wolf dreams, she expands her skin-changing abilities, and she keeps her list. And by the time we get to her final chapters, that tension has not resolved. As Mercy, Arya plays her role perfectly. She smiles, she jokes, she obeys. She is exactly what the Faceless Men require her to be in playing this role. And then she steps outside of it by choosing her own target when a criminal from her list appears before her, Raff the Sweetling. In A Clash of Kings, Raff murdered Arya's friend Lami while laughing. Here's the scene. Can you walk? He asked, concerned. No, said Lami. You gotta carry me. You think so? The man lifted his spear casually and drove the point through the boy's soft throat. Lami never even had a chance to yield again. He jerked once, and that was all. When the man pulled his spear loose, blood sprayed out in a dark fountain. Carry him, he muttered, chuckling. So in the Winds of Winter chapter, Arya lures Raff away, plays the part he expects, and creates a scenario where Raff says the same words Lami said before he was murdered. She does this by injuring Raff's leg and saying this. Well, she said, I don't know how you'll get there then. You'll need to carry me. See, thought Mercy, you know your line, and so do I. Think so? Asked Arya sweetly. Raff the Sweetling looked up sharply as a long thin blade came sliding from her sleeve. She slipped it through his throat beneath his chin, twisted and ripped it back out sideways with a single smooth slash. A fine red rain followed, and in his eyes the light went out. And that is where her story ends, at least for now. We don't know if the Faceless Men will respond in the same way they responded to her execution of the Night's Watch deserter, by progressing her training to another level and framing it as a punishment, or if there will be other consequences. We also don't know how Arya's actions will impact Cersei's attempt to solve her difficulties with the Iron Bank, though I have an idea I will get to in another video regarding that. But what is certain is that Arya's story will likely progress forward in a way that is fitting with her character in adapting, surviving, and growing in intelligence. In a fairy tale, outwitting a supernatural force is the victory. In Arya's story, outsmarting them, taking steps towards survival, and gaining skills is the point. Each of these monsters she has faced, she has learned from and been able to trick and trap. My guess is that Martin will continue that pattern as she continues on with the story in The Winds of Winter and A Dream for Spring. But what do you think? How will Arya's story continue in the next couple of books? Are these the only fairy tale types that Arya's story reflects, or are there others I've missed? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for listening to the Lore Weaver podcast. If this episode sparked questions or changed how you viewed the text, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, or pass this episode along to someone who enjoys thoughtful literary discussion. Until next time, keep reading closely and explore the lore.